The Viridian ship cut through Earth's cloudy sky like a gleaming knife. Inside, Commander Zixvrel paced the bridge, his four arms moving in the nervous pattern that his species showed when stressed. The readings on his screens made no sense. According to their best research, humans were a Class 3 civilization, advanced enough for basic space travel but still primitive in many ways. Yet what waited below them defied all logic. "Confirm these readings," Zixvrel ordered his science. "Officer, confirmed, Commander. The meeting zone shows temperatures exceeding 1200 degrees in some areas. Active combustion is consuming approximately 40 square miles of terrain, and it's spreading rapidly." Zixvrel clicked his mandibles in frustration. First contact protocols were clear. Meet the species in their chosen location to show respect. But this was madness. The humans had chosen a literal inferno as their meeting place. Send an emergency message. Tell them we must postpone. No sentient beings could survive those conditions without extensive protection. Meanwhile, on the ground, Lieutenant Commander Jack Miller lowered his binoculars and sighed. The alien ship had stopped its descent and now hovered about 10 miles up. "Looks like our new friends got cold feet," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Lisa Ford, his second-in-command, shrugged. "Can't blame them. Not everyone appreciates California in fire season." Miller and his 5-person team stood on a ridge overlooking the valley. Behind them, massive flames consumed the dry forest in a controlled burn that the Forestry Service had planned months ago. The Earth Defense Force had simply taken advantage of the situation for their training exercise. When the aliens requested a meeting in this region, it seemed perfect. 2 birds, 1 stone. "Sir, incoming message from the Viridians," called out Nicole Webb, their communications specialist. She adjusted her earpiece and frowned. "They're canceling. Say something about unsuitable conditions for life forms." Miller laughed and took a drink from his canteen. "Tell them the conditions are within acceptable parameters for human meetings. We're right where we said we'd be." The small team had set up a basic camp on the ridge. Despite the heat radiating from the valley, they seemed comfortable enough in their standard-issue heat-resistant uniforms. Nothing fancy, just well-designed gear that reflected humanity's long history of dealing with harsh environments. Ethan Gray, the team's tactical specialist, kept his rifle casually positioned across his lap as he sat on a rock. "Think they expected us to roll out the red carpet? Maybe set up in a nice air-conditioned hotel?" "Different planets, different expectations," Miller replied. "Remember the briefing? Their homeworld has been climate-controlled for 10,000 years. They probably don't even have wildfires anymore." Amy Diaz walked up, her tablet showing a map of the fire's progression. As the team's environmental specialist, she had been monitoring the controlled burn. "Fire's behaving exactly as predicted. We've got about 6 hours before we need to change position, but we're perfectly safe here." She looked up at the hovering spacecraft. "Unlike our friends up there who seem to think we're standing in hell itself." Miller nodded and reached for the communication unit. "Patch me through to them, Webb." When the connection established, Miller spoke clearly and calmly. "Viridian vessel, this is Lieutenant Commander Miller of the Earth Defense Force. We acknowledge your concerns, but I assure you conditions at the meeting point are well within human safety parameters. This is actually a controlled ecological management operation. We call it a prescribed burn." There was a long pause before the reply came. "Earth Defense Force. Our sensors indicate temperatures that would cook flesh and combust lungs. Are you using some form of advanced protection technology?" Miller looked down at his standard-issue gear and then at his team, who were trying not to laugh. "Negative, Viridian vessel. We're using standard environmental gear. The fire is at a safe distance. This is normal procedure for us." He paused, then added, "In fact, we specifically scheduled this meeting during the burn as a training opportunity for my team." Another long silence followed. Miller could almost imagine the aliens trying to process this information. Ryan Martinez, the team's survival expert, was arranging stones to create a small cooking area. "Think they'll believe we're actually having lunch out here?" he asked with a grin. "Let's find out," Miller replied. He turned back to the comm unit. "Viridian vessel, We're preparing our midday meal. You're welcome to join us. The view of the fire is quite spectacular from here. The silence from the alien ship stretched, even longer this time. Finally, the Viridian commander responded, his voice noticeably higher-pitched. You are eating while a firestorm rages? It's hardly a firestorm, Miller corrected. Just a controlled burn. But yes, we're about to eat. Standard procedure during extended operations. The team tried to keep straight faces. This wasn't exactly standard protocol for first contact, but Miller had been given some latitude to demonstrate human adaptability. The brass back at headquarters had theorized that displaying humanity's comfort in harsh environments might earn respect from spacefaring species. We will, reconsider our approach, the Viridian commander finally replied. Stand by. As the communication ended, the team broke into laughter. Their faces must be priceless right now, Ford said, wiping tears from her eyes. Imagine explaining to your superior that the primitive humans are having a picnic in what you consider apocalyptic conditions. Miller nodded, but his expression turned more serious. Let's not overdo it. First impressions matter. We want allies, not terrified neighbors. For the next hour, the team continued their routine tasks while the alien ship remained stationary high above. They monitored the fire, checked their equipment, and yes, they ate their meal. Standard field rations heated on a small portable stove. Finally, the Viridian ship began to move again, slowly descending toward their position. As it grew closer, they could make out more details. A sleek oval-shaped craft with no visible propulsion system, roughly the size of a small commercial airplane. They're coming down, Webb announced unnecessarily, as they all watched the approach. Everyone, remember the briefing, Miller said quietly. Be respectful but natural. They need to see that we're not putting on a show. The Viridian vessel touched down about 200 yards from their position, stirring up dust that mingled with the smoke already in the air. A portion of the hull shimmered and then seemed to dissolve, revealing an opening. What emerged made the team blink in surprise despite their training. The three Viridians were encased in what looked like walking environmental chambers, clear bubbles surrounding their insect-like forms, with complex machinery humming at the base. They moved awkwardly across the rough terrain, clearly struggling with the gravity and conditions. They brought their own atmosphere, Diaz whispered, fascinated. Those must be fully enclosed environmental suits. Miller stepped forward, raising a hand in greeting. Welcome to Earth, he called out. We appreciate you joining us despite the challenging conditions. The lead Viridian, slightly taller than the others, came to a stop a safe distance away. Its voice emerged through some kind of external speaker. We are surprised by your species' resilience, Lieutenant Commander Miller. Our research did not indicate that humans could withstand such extreme environments. Miller smiled. This is hardly extreme for us. In fact, we consider this perfect training weather. The three Viridians huddled together in their environmental suits, their compound eyes shifting rapidly as they took in the humans standing casually before them. Behind the Earth team, flames licked the sky, painting everything in shades of orange and red. Smoke drifted across the ridge, yet the humans barely seemed to notice. I am Ambassador Krill, the tallest Viridian said through the speaker on his suit. With me are Science Officer Zinn and Security Chief Morrow. We represent the Viridian Council of 12 Worlds. Jack Miller nodded and introduced his team one by one. Lieutenant Commander Jack Miller, Earth Defense Force. This is Lieutenant Lisa Ford, my second in command. Communications Officer Nicole Webb, Environmental Specialist Amy Diaz, Tactical Specialist Ethan Gray, and Survival Expert Ryan Martinez. The alien's eyes fixed on Martinez, who was currently using a stick to poke at the small fire where he had been heating the team's rations. You create more fire? Ambassador Krill asked, the translator failing to hide his alarm. Martinez looked up and smiled. Just a cooking fire. Want some coffee? The Viridians shuffled backward slightly. Miller cleared his throat. Perhaps we should begin our discussions. The purpose of this meeting was to establish preliminary diplomatic relations between Earth and the Viridian Council. Ambassador Krill seemed to gather himself. Yes. Though we must admit, your choice of meeting location is distressing. Our research indicated humans prefer climate-controlled environments for important functions. Lisa Ford stepped forward. We do for formal occasions. But this meeting serves multiple purposes. We're also conducting environmental training. Training? Science Officer Zinn moved closer, curiosity apparently overcoming fear. You deliberately expose yourselves to dangerous conditions as practice? Miller nodded. Exactly. The Forestry Service planned this controlled burn months ago to prevent more dangerous wildfires. We coordinated our exercise with them. When your request for a meeting came through, we saw an opportunity to combine objectives. The Viridians conferred among themselves, their speech too quiet and rapid for the translation devices to pick up. Finally, Ambassador Krill turned back to the humans. Our species has not experienced a natural disaster in over 2,000 years. We control our environment completely. Amy Diaz raised an eyebrow. Completely? What about evolutionary adaptation? Don't your species need environmental challenges to maintain biological resilience? Science Officer Zinn's posture changed, seeming almost embarrassed. We supplement with genetic modifications when necessary. Ryan Martinez shook his head and muttered something about hothouse flowers before turning back to tend his fire. Miller shot him a warning look before addressing the aliens again. Perhaps we can show you why we train this way. Would you like to observe some of our procedures? The Viridians agreed, though they insisted on maintaining a safe distance, which to them meant nearly 50 yards from the humans. From this position, they watched as Miller's team demonstrated basic wildfire safety techniques. Ethan Gray cleared a fire line, digging down to mineral soil to create a barrier. Lisa Ford showed how to identify wind shifts that might change the fire's direction. Amy Diaz explained the ecology of fire-dependent forests. Ryan Martinez demonstrated emergency shelter deployment, climbing into a reflective personal fire shelter that could save a human's life in a burnover situation. This is the worst-case scenario, Martinez explained as he lay flat in the shelter. If you get caught with no way out, this can buy you enough time for rescue or for the fire front to pass. You would willingly remain in the path of a fire? Security Chief Morrow asked, speaking for the first time. Why not simply leave the area entirely? Sometimes that's not an option, Martinez replied as he expertly repacked the shelter. Fire can move faster than humans, especially uphill. Then why enter such regions at all? Ambassador Krill asked, genuinely puzzled. Miller considered how to explain. Because they exist. Earth has many environments, some hospitable, some hostile. Rather than control them all, which would be impossible for us, we adapt to them. The conversation continued as the day progressed. The humans maintained their exercise schedule, rotating tasks and monitoring the main fire in the valley below. The Viridians observed everything with increasing interest, occasionally asking questions that revealed just how different their approach to their environment was. By mid-afternoon, the aliens had grown slightly more comfortable, though they still refused to exit their environmental suits. Science Officer Zinn had moved closer to the humans, fascinated by their equipment and techniques. Your species shows remarkable adaptability, Zinn noted as he watched Nicole Webb adjust the team's communications equipment to account for the smoke interference. Webb smiled. Necessity is the mother of invention. Earth throws challenges at us, we figure out ways to overcome them. As the day wore on, the controlled burn in the valley began to behave differently. Amy Diaz frowned as she checked her tablet. Miller, we've got a situation, she said, showing him the screen. Winds shifting faster than predicted. Fires jumping the containment lines in the northeast section. Miller took the tablet and studied it. Time to evacuation point. 4 hours originally, Diaz replied. But with these new developments, maybe 2. The Viridians, sensing the change in mood, moved closer. Is something wrong? Ambassador, Krill asked. Miller considered his words carefully. First contact protocols advised against showing alarm or panic, but honesty was also important for building trust. The fire is moving differently than expected, he explained. Nothing serious yet, but we'll need to change our position sooner than planned. The Viridians immediately became agitated, their limbs moving in rapid patterns. We should return to our ship immediately, Security Chief Morrow insisted. Not necessary yet, Miller assured them. We have plenty of time, but this might be a good opportunity for you to see how we respond to changing conditions. Miller turned to his team and issued quick, clear orders. Each member began packing specific equipment. Their movements were practiced, efficient, with no wasted motion. Within minutes, they had shifted from casual observation to ready mobility. The Viridians watched this transformation with apparent fascination. Your team functions differently now, Ambassador Krill observed. There is a harmony to your movements. Training, Lisa Ford explained as she checked her pack. We drill for this constantly. As the team prepared to move to their secondary position, a loud crack echoed across the ridge. All eyes turned to see a massive tree, weakened by the fire, below toppling toward their position. Move, Miller shouted, and his team scattered instantly. The Viridians, slower to react in their bulky environmental suits, stood frozen in place. The tree was falling directly in their path. Without hesitation, Ethan Gray sprinted toward them, reaching Ambassador Krill just as the tree crashed down. He shoved the alien aside with enough force to send them both rolling away from the impact zone. The massive trunk slammed into the ground where Krill had stood moments before, sending up a shower of sparks and debris. Science Officer Zinn and Security Chief Morrow had managed to scramble away in the other direction. As the dust settled, Gray helped the ambassador back to his feet. The Viridian's environmental suit was slightly damaged, with a small crack in the outer casing. Are you injured? Gray asked, genuine concern in his voice. Ambassador Krill seemed stunned, not by the near miss, but by the human's actions. You risked yourself for me? The alien asked, his translator struggling to convey his emotions. Gray shrugged. Of course, that's what we do. Miller approached quickly. Ambassador, we need to move now. The situation has changed. The group moved quickly across the ridge, away from the fallen tree and toward their secondary position. Miller led the way, with the rest of his team forming a protective circle around the three Viridians. The aliens struggled to keep pace, their environmental suits clearly not designed for rapid movement over rough terrain. Ambassador, if you remove your suits, you'll move faster, Miller suggested, slowing slightly to walk beside Krill. The ambassador's compound eyes widened within, his clear helmet. Remove our protection? The atmospheric toxins would kill us in minutes. Lisa Ford glanced back. Toxins? You mean the smoke? It's not great for us either, but it won't kill you immediately. Science Officer Zinn moved closer, curiosity winning. Overcaution again. Our scans show dangerous levels of carbon monoxide, particulate matter, and extreme heat. Are humans naturally resistant to these elements? Ryan Martinez laughed. Naturally resistant? No. We just deal with it. The levels right now aren't immediately dangerous if we keep moving. The aliens conferred again in their rapid, clicking language. Finally, Ambassador Krill spoke. We will maintain our environmental protection. The risk is unacceptable. Miller nodded. Your choice. Let's keep moving. As they hiked, the fire in the valley changed direction, responding to the shifting winds that Amy Diaz had detected earlier. The roar grew louder, and the smoke thickened. The humans pulled bandanas over their faces and continued forward without breaking stride. The Viridians, despite their environmental suits, seemed increasingly distressed. How far to safety? Security Chief Morrow demanded, his translator failing to hide the panic in his voice. 2 miles to the extraction point, Miller replied calmly. We're monitoring the fire's progress. We have time. Nicole Webb kept one hand to her ear, listening to updates from the Forestry Service. Containment teams are being deployed to the northeast section, she reported. They're bringing in air support. As if on cue, a massive aircraft appeared overhead, flying surprisingly low over the burning valley. The humans stopped to watch as it released a cascade of red fire retardant that fell like rain onto the advancing edge of the fire. Our aerial firefighting units, Amy Diaz explained to the stunned aliens. That's a DC-10 air tanker. It can drop about 12,000 gallons of retardant in one go. You fight the fire from the air? Science Officer Zin's voice contained a mix of fear and admiration. Your species flies machines directly into disaster zones? Ethan Gray nodded. Pilots train specifically for these conditions. It's dangerous. Work, but effective. The group continued moving as more aircraft appeared, working in coordinated patterns to slow the fire's advance. The Viridians watched with growing fascination, their initial terror slowly giving way to something else. A kind of reluctant respect. After another 30 minutes of hiking, they reached a small clearing where a human helicopter waited. The pilot waved as they approached. Extraction point, Miller announced. This chopper will take us to the command center where we can continue our discussions in more comfortable surroundings. The Viridians hesitated at the sight of the helicopter, its rotors stirring up dust and smoke. Another flying machine? Directly above the fire zone? Ambassador Krill's voice rose in pitch. Standard procedure, Miller replied. Don't worry, Sam. Is one of our best pilots. The pilot, a woman with short brown hair and a weather-beaten face, grinned at the aliens. First time flying in a human aircraft? You're in for a treat. As they approached the helicopter, Science Officer Zin suddenly stopped and pointed toward the valley. What is that? Everyone turned to look. Through gaps in the smoke, they could see tiny figures moving near the fire line. Firefighters in yellow protective gear, working directly at the edge of the flames. Ground crews, Lisa Ford explained. They create fire breaks, conduct burnout, operations protect structures. The most dangerous job in this operation. They work inside the fire zone? Security Chief Morrow asked, sounding bewildered. Someone has to, Ryan Martinez said with a shrug. We can't fight fires just from a distance. The Viridians watched the distant figures for a long moment. Something seemed to shift in their understanding. Your species faces danger directly, Ambassador Krill said finally. We would have used drones, machines, remote technologies. We use those too, Amy Diaz replied. But sometimes you need humans on the ground, making decisions in real time. No AI can replace that kind of adaptive thinking. The moment was interrupted by Nicole Webb. Sir, update from command. The fire jumped another line. They're ordering all personnel to pull back to safe zones immediately. Miller checked his tablet and frowned. The situation's escalating faster than predicted. We need to move now. As if to emphasize his words, a loud roaring sound filled the air, and the sky darkened noticeably. They all turned to see a massive cloud of smoke and fire rising from the valley, forming into an ominous column. What is happening? Ambassador Krill asked, backing away from the site. Pyrocumulus cloud, Amy Diaz explained, her voice tense. The fire's creating its own weather system now. This is bad. Miller made a quick decision. Everyone on the helicopter now. His team responded instantly, helping the Viridians aboard despite their awkward environmental suits. As they settled into the seats, the aliens stared out the windows at the growing firestorm. Your world is alive with danger, Science Officer Zin said quietly, almost to himself. And that's why we train in it, Miller replied, buckling his harness. To stay one step ahead. The helicopter lifted off, banking sharply away from the smoke column. Through the windows, they could see the full extent of the fire now, a massive living entity that crawled across the landscape, consuming everything in its path. Yet even as they watched, tiny aircraft continued to dive toward it, dropping their loads of retardant in precisely coordinated patterns. Why do they not retreat? Security Chief Morrow asked, watching the aircraft with disbelief. Because there are communities beyond those ridges, Miller explained. Homes, farms, people. If the fire reaches them, the destruction would be immense. The Viridians fell silent, processing this information. As the helicopter gained altitude, giving them a wider view of the operation below, Ambassador Krill turned to Miller. In our history, before we mastered environmental control, we also faced such dangers. But we chose a different path. We rebuilt our world to eliminate the threats, rather than adapting ourselves to face them. Lisa Ford smiled slightly. Different approaches to the same problem. You controlled your environment. We learned to thrive in chaos. Is one approach better than the other? Science Officer Zinn asked. Miller considered the question. Better depends on your goals. Your approach gave you safety and stability. Ours forced us to become adaptable, resilient. And which will serve better as we move into the galaxy? Ambassador Krill asked, his question surprisingly direct. The helicopter banked again, passing through a cloud of smoke that momentarily obscured the view. When they emerged, the fire was behind them and ahead lay rolling hills untouched by the flames. That, Miller said with a small smile, is what our two species need to figure out together. The helicopter landed at a bustling command center set up in a large clearing. Dozens of vehicles were parked in neat rows, and temporary structures housed communications equipment, medical facilities, and rest areas for the firefighting teams. People moved with purpose between stations, their faces showing focus but not panic. As Miller led the Viridians from the helicopter, they froze at the entrance to the main command tent. For the first time since meeting the humans, they saw genuine concern on the faces of the Earth Defense Force team. Inside the tent, a large digital map displayed the fire's progression in real time. Red areas showed active burning, while yellow indicated zones at immediate risk. The red was spreading faster than anyone had predicted. What happened? Miller asked a woman in a Forestry Service uniform who was directing operations. Wind shift, combined with extremely dry conditions, she replied without looking up from her tablet. The fire created its own weather system faster than our models predicted. We've evacuated 3 communities already. Miller introduced her to the Viridians. This is Chief Sarah Alvarez, Incident Commander for this operation. Chief, these are our visitors from the Viridian Council. Alvarez merely nodded, too busy to engage in diplomacy. The aliens seemed to appreciate her focus, watching as she issued clear, direct orders to teams in the field. Science Officer Zinn moved closer to the digital map, fascinated by the technology. Your predictive models failed, yet you do not seem disturbed by this. Alvarez glanced up. Models are just models. Nature doesn't always follow our predictions. That's why we have contingency plans for our contingency plans. Security Chief Morrow, who had been quiet for some time, suddenly spoke. You anticipated failure? We anticipated change, Alvarez corrected. Fires are dynamic. They create their own conditions as they grow. We adapt our response accordingly. A young man rushed into the tent, his face streaked with ash. Chief, we've got a problem at Sector 7. The fire jumped the containment line. There's a group of hikers trapped on Bear Ridge. Alvarez's expression hardened. How many? 5, according to their emergency call. The smoke is too thick for helicopter extraction. The command center erupted into controlled chaos as teams coordinated a rescue response. The Viridians watched, their alien postures showing increasing agitation. These hikers, Ambassador Krill, asked Miller, why were they permitted in a dangerous area? Miller sighed. We issued evacuation orders yesterday, but some people don't take them seriously. The hiking trails were closed, but not everyone obeys the signs. Your species doesn't follow the directions of authorities? Security Chief Morrow sounded genuinely shocked. Ryan Martinez laughed despite the tension. Not always. Individual freedom is highly valued in our culture. Sometimes that means people make bad decisions. And yet you risk other lives to save them? Ambassador Krill's compound eyes fixed on Miller. Every time, Miller confirmed. We don't leave people behind, even when they've been foolish. The conversation was interrupted when Alvarez approached them. Lieutenant Commander, I need your team. We're short on qualified personnel for the rescue operation. Miller didn't hesitate. We're ready. What's the plan? Ground approach to Bear Ridge. Airdrops are impossible with the current wind conditions. The hikers have about 30 minutes before the fire reaches them. Miller turned to his team. Each nodded immediately, already checking their gear. What? About our guests? Miller asked, gesturing to the Viridians. Alvarez looked the aliens up and down. They stay here. Those environmental suits would slow you down, and they'd never survive in the current conditions. Ambassador Krill stepped forward. We wish to observe. In our transport, perhaps? Alvarez shook her head. No civilian vessels in the air, right? Now. Too dangerous with the fire behavior and all the tankers operating. The ambassador seemed about to argue when Science Officer Zinn placed a hand on his arm. Perhaps there is another way we can assist? Our ship has advanced scanning technology. We could provide real-time data on fire movement from orbit. Alvarez looked skeptical but nodded. If you can link your systems to ours, any additional data would help. The next few minutes passed in a blur of activity. The Viridians returned to their ship via a small transport vehicle, while Miller's team prepared for the rescue mission. Science Officer Zinn worked with communications specialists to establish a link between Viridian sensors and the human command systems. As Miller's team prepared to depart, Ambassador Krill approached them, having removed his bulky environmental suit for the first time. Outside of it, he was smaller than expected, with an iridescent exoskeleton that shifted colors in the light. Your mission has a significant probability of failure, the ambassador stated bluntly. Lisa Ford smiled grimly as she checked her gear. We prefer to focus on the probability of success. Why risk yourselves? These hikers violated safety protocols. Miller looked the alien directly in his compound eyes. Because that's what we do. We help each other even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Before the ambassador could respond, Alvarez called out, Miller, we've got the first data feed from the alien ship. It's good, better than good. We can see heat signatures through the smoke. On the main display, new information appeared, showing not just the fire's location but its internal temperature variations, wind patterns within the smoke, and the location of the trapped hikers. This changes everything, Alvarez said, her expression brightening. With this data, we can plot you a safe path directly to the hikers. Miller nodded to Ambassador Krill. Thank you. This will make a difference. The ambassador's color shifted slightly. We contribute what we can. As Miller's team moved toward the waiting ground vehicles, Science Officer Zinn hurried after them. I have programmed your communication devices to receive direct feeds from our sensors. You will have updated data every 15 seconds. Nicole Webb looked surprised. That's more frequent than our standard updates. The situation is dynamic, Zinn replied, using the human's own terminology. You should have the best information possible. Miller studied the alien for a moment. You're learning our approach. I am curious, Zinn admitted. Our species has not faced true environmental danger in generations. Your methods are alien to us but clearly effective. As the rescue vehicles prepared to depart, Security Chief Morrow unexpectedly approached. I wish to accompany your team, he announced. Miller blinked in surprise. Chief Alvarez said your environmental suits would slow us down. I have removed my suit, Morrow replied. Indeed, like the ambassador, he stood before them in his natural form. I am the security expert of our delegation. I should observe your methods directly. Miller exchanged glances with his team. After a moment, Lisa Ford spoke. It's dangerous. The conditions out there are challenging even for us. I understand, Morrow replied. But how can I properly assess your species if I observe only from safety? Miller considered the request, then nodded. Gear him up, but stay close to Webb at all times, he instructed the alien. If she tells you to do something, do it instantly. No questions. Understood, Morrow agreed. As they climbed into the waiting vehicles, Ambassador Krill watched with a mixture of concern and confusion. Our protocol forbids unnecessary risk, he said quietly to Miller. Miller smiled grimly. Sometimes the most necessary things look unnecessary until later. The engines roared to life and the rescue convoy moved out, heading directly toward the advancing wall of fire. The rescue vehicles raced along dirt roads that wound through the foothills, drawing ever closer to the massive wall of smoke ahead. Inside the lead vehicle, Miller studied the data coming from the Viridian ship overhead. The alien technology provided incredibly detailed information, showing them exactly where the fire was most intense and where it was moving fastest. Take the fork to the right, Miller instructed the driver. The Viridian data shows less fire activity on that side of the ridge. Beside him, Security Chief Morrow watched everything with unblinking compound eyes. The alien had been outfitted with basic protective gear, though he refused to wear the full face mask, claiming it interfered with his vision. "Your species does this regularly?" Morrow asked as the vehicle bounced over rough terrain. "Drive toward danger?" Ryan Martinez nodded from the back seat. "Firefighters, police officers, soldiers, paramedics, search and rescue teams. Plenty of humans choose careers that involve running toward trouble when others run away." "But why?" The aliens. Genuine confusion was evident. Lisa Ford turned from her position in the passenger seat. "Because someone has to, and because we can." The vehicles slowed as they reached a roadblock. Several Forestry Service workers flagged them down, their faces grim behind protective masks. "This is as far as vehicles can go," one shouted over the rye, sound of the approaching fire. "The road ahead is blocked by fallen trees. You'll have to continue on foot." Miller nodded and turned to his team. "Gear up. Full masks now. The air's going to get much worse." Everyone moved quickly, checking equipment with practiced efficiency. Morrow watched them transform, pulling on masks and tanks that made them look almost alien themselves. "Chief Morrow, last chance to stay with the vehicles," Miller said, his voice slightly muffled through his mask. The Viridian straightened. "I will continue." Miller nodded and handed him a mask. "Then you wear this. No arguments." Surprisingly, the alien complied without protest. Nicole Webb checked her communication device. "The Viridian ship reports the hikers are still at the same location. They haven't moved in 10 minutes. Probably overcome by smoke," Amy Diaz suggested grimly. "We need to hurry." The team set off up the trail, moving at a rapid pace despite their heavy gear. The smoke grew thicker with each step, and soon the world narrowed to just a few feet. Low visibility. The sound of the fire grew louder, a continuous roar punctuated by sharp cracks as trees exploded from internal heat. Security Chief Morrow kept pace surprisingly well, his alien physiology seemingly well adapted to the physical challenge. His eyes, designed to see into different spectrums, occasionally proved useful as he pointed out obstacles before the humans could see them through the smoke. After 20 minutes of hard hiking, they reached a creek crossing where the trail divided. Miller checked the Viridian data again. "The hikers are up there," he said, pointing to a rocky outcrop barely visible through the smoke. "But the fire is approaching from both sides. We have maybe 15 minutes before this whole area is compromised." Ethan Gray studied the terrain. "Standard approach won't work. Creek's too wide to cross here, and going around will take too long." Miller made a quick decision. "We split up. Ford, Martinez, Diaz, cross downstream where it's narrower, then come up from the south. Webb, Gray, Morrow, and I will try to find a crossing here and approach from the north. First team there secures the hikers and reports." "Sir," Webb said hesitantly, "the Viridian data shows the fire moving faster on the south route." Miller nodded. "I know, that's why I'm sending our 3 best wilderness specialists that way. They'll move faster." The team split without further discussion. As Miller's group searched for a crossing point, he noticed Morrow watching him intently. "You sent your most capable personnel toward the greater danger," the alien observed. "I sent the right people for the job," Miller corrected. "Ford can navigate in zero visibility. Martinez knows every survival technique in the book. Diaz understands fire behavior better than anyone on my team. But you care for these humans," Morrow pressed. "Yet you directed them toward increased risk." "Because I trust them," Miller replied simply. "And because those hikers need the best chance we can give them." They found a fallen tree that offered a precarious crossing over the creek. As they carefully made their way across, Webb's communication device beeped. "Update from the Viridian ship," she reported. "The fire's changing direction again. It's accelerating toward the hikers' position, from the east." "Can the other team reach them in time?" Gray asked. Webb shook her head. "Not according to these projections." Miller didn't hesitate. "We push harder. Run if you can." They abandoned caution and moved at a sprint through the smoky forest, climbing the steep trail toward the rocky outcrop. Twice they had to detour around burning trees, and once they crouched low as a sudden wall of flame erupted to their right. Morrow kept pace, though his breathing became labored through the mask. "Your team follows without question," he gasped as they ran. "We trust each other," Miller replied between breaths. "That's how we survive." Finally, they reached the outcrop. Through the thick smoke, they could make out 5 figures huddled against the rocks. 2 were unconscious, the others barely responsive. "Webb, triage," Miller ordered. "Gray, emergency shelters. Morrow, help me with the conscious ones." As the security chief helped Miller lift a semi-conscious hiker, the alien suddenly stiffened. "The fire," he said, pointing with his free hand. "It's surrounding us." Miller looked up to see flames approaching from 3 sides, cutting off their escape route. The roar was deafening now, and the heat intense enough to feel through their protective gear. Webb finished her check of the hikers. 2 severe smoke inhalation, 3 moderate. None can walk unassisted. Miller's mind raced through options. "Gray, how many emergency shelters did we bring?" 4 standard, 1 oversized," Gray replied, already unpacking the reflective material. "Not enough for all of us," Miller calculated grimly. His communication device crackled. It was Ford. "Miller, we're cut off by the fire. Can't reach your position. Satellite data shows you're about to be overrun." "Copy that," Miller replied calmly. "We've found the hikers, but we're surrounded. Bringing out what we can." He turned to his team. "Webb, Gray, each of you take 1 unconscious hiker in a shelter. Morrow and I will each take 1 of the semi-conscious ones." Webb looked at him sharply. "That's only 4, sir. And what about you and Morrow?" "I'll take the last hiker," Miller said. "Morrow will use the oversized shelter." "And you?" Morrow asked, his alien eyes focusing intently on Miller. Miller didn't answer directly. "The shelters are designed for humans. They might not work for your physiology. The oversized one gives you the best chance." As the team prepared the emergency shelters, the fire closed in rapidly. The air became nearly unbreathable despite their masks, and the heat was blistering. Suddenly, their communications device crackled. Again. "Miller, there's a new update from the Viridian ship," Ford's voice came through. "They're doing something unusual." Before Miller could respond, a brilliant light cut through the smoke overhead. The unmistakable shape of the Viridian vessel descended directly toward them, hovering just above the treetops. A shimmering field extended downward from the ship, pushing the flames back in an expanding circle. "What are they doing?" Gray asked, in astonishment. Miller's communication device beeped with an incoming message. It was Ambassador Krill. "Lieutenant Commander." The ambassador's voice came through clearly despite the roaring fire. "Our ship's defensive field can temporarily repel the thermal energy. We cannot sustain this for long, but it should provide you an extraction window." Miller stared upward in disbelief. "They're risking their ship," he said quietly. "Their technology." "For us?" Webb asked, equally stunned. A hatch opened in the bottom of the Viridian vessel and a platform began to descend on cables. "Lieutenant Commander Miller," Ambassador Krill's voice came again. "Please expedite your boarding. Our systems cannot maintain this field for more than 5 minutes." The team moved quickly, securing the injured hikers for transport. As they worked, Security Chief Morrow turned to Miller. "You were prepared to sacrifice yourself," the alien stated. It wasn't a question. Miller shrugged as he lifted an unconscious hiker. "Part of the job." "No," Morrow replied. "It is more than duty. I have seen enough to understand now." The platform touched down, and they carefully loaded the injured hikers. As Miller helped the last person aboard, he looked at Morrow. "Understand what?" "Why your species will survive," the alien replied simply. "You do not flee the firestorm, you face it together."